What is going on, guys? Jesse here. So if you're in the market for a new premium flagship device right now, there are plenty of options out there. But these three, the iPhone 13 Pro, Pixel 6 Pro, and now the S22 Ultra are probably at the top of your list. And with smartphones in general just all being so good now, the decision can be pretty tough. Because I'll just say it right now, any one of these three phones is a valid choice. Like, they're all so good that you literally just can't make a wrong decision. It all just depends on how you use your phone and which features you personally care about the most. So in this video, I'm going to be comparing them to each other, and I'm going to try and answer the question of who I think each of these phones is for. So if that sounds good, let's hop right in. So let's start this off by talking about the physical builds of all of these devices, and for the most part, they're very similar. First of all, these are all very big phones, and if you're not into that, the iPhone is the only one out of these three that has a smaller version. But in terms of how they feel in the hand, I would probably rank them in this order. First is S22, followed by the Pixel, with the iPhone in last place. It just has all these very flat edges and sharp corners that feel very abrasive in the hands, which, I mean, to be honest, never really bothered me. It's just that when I switch between holding either of the other devices, I just go, wow, those feel a lot nicer. And the reason I put the S22 over the Pixel is literally because of the frosted glass back. Like, I've been saying this for a while now, but I really like the way that Samsung does their glass. Like other phones, the iPhone for example, also have a frosted glass back, but they just don't hit the same as the ones on the flagship Samsung devices. And this year, they've just kept on improving on that formula, and it feels great. But in terms of build quality, I gotta give it to the iPhone. Like, not to say that the other two devices are poorly built or anything like that. I think if we're just talking about strict quality, then the S22 is on par with the iPhone. The reason that I'm giving the iPhone the edge here is just because it's the heaviest and it gives you that kind of heft that some people might be looking for. And that combined with the flat edges just makes this thing feel like an absolute brick in the best possible way. So if you're after the most solid feeling phone, the iPhone is it. Meanwhile, the Pixel definitely does give off the impression of lagging behind the others a bit in the build department, but not by a huge margin. It's the lightest weight, and all of the finishes and buttons and stuff just don't feel quite as nice as the other two. Okay, last thing about the physical design is the aesthetics. Of course, this is very subjective, and you can decide for yourself which one you're feeling the most, but the only thing I really wanted to mention was about the S22. Like, the iPhone and Pixel have been around for long enough that I think you probably know at this point if you like them or not. But with the S22, when I first saw leaks of this thing, I was like, what the heck are they doing? Like, that's so hideous. And then when I got it in hand for the first time, I was still definitely not feeling it. But now, 2 weeks later, it's really starting to grow on me, and I actually kind of like it. Same with the color too. I did not like it at first, but really it's just starting to grow on me overall now. Okay, so next let's talk about the screens. They're all roughly the same resolution and size. The iPhone is a bit lower than the other two, but at this screen size, you're just not gonna notice. They're all also 120 Hz, which is awesome. And in terms of smoothness, to my eye, none of these really have an advantage. But in max brightness, there's a little bit more of a gap between these three. The S22 gets the brightest with a max brightness of 1750 nits, which is very bright. To the point, if you crank this thing up in like a normally lit room, it gets kind of uncomfortably bright. Which of course also means that sunlight visibility is great as well. The iPhone comes in second at about 1000 nits, and the Pixel comes in last at about 800. And in terms of minimum brightness, the Pixel seems to get the dimmest out of the three, which makes viewing it at night a lot less straining on the eyes, while the iPhone seems to get the brightest with the minimum brightness. But to be honest, all three of these are just fine, but if you found that that's something that's bothered you a lot in other phones, maybe something to consider. Outside of brightness though, all three of these screens are great, like truly beautiful looking panels. And it's actually kind of hard to tell a big difference between the three of them, even when looking at them side by side. but there's just something about the S22 screens that just make me go like, wow, every time I look at it. Like something about the way that Samsung has tuned their color science, and I mean, it's no secret that Samsung makes great displays, and I gotta say that this is probably the best display in any smartphone right now. A couple of things about the iPhone display I feel like I gotta mention though. First, these bezels, man, like these things make me so angry. I just feel like there's no reason they need to be this thick. Like this is 2 C's thick. And that combined with this notch just makes this otherwise very good display seem kind of dated. Also, no always on display. Now this is, I guess, more of a software than a hardware related thing, but I would really like to see some sort of option to have an always on display of some sort on here, just cause it's a feature that I find incredibly useful on the Pixel and S22, or really most modern Android phones for that matter. And it does eat up a little bit of battery life, but that's a feature I'm okay with sacrificing a little bit of battery life to get. And I guess that might be part of the reason that the iPhone has a pretty healthy lead in battery life. Like in my entire time of using this phone, I've only had to charge this before the end of the day a handful of times. And that was normally when I was doing long road trips with a ton of GPSing and playing games while I was in the passenger seat. So I find it to be totally acceptable, and it's just the type of battery life that makes you not have to worry about bringing a power bank when you're out for a full day, which is seriously awesome. The S22's battery, I would say, is still within the realm of what I would call good. It's just not on the same level as the iPhone. Like you can definitely make it through a day without needing to top off in the middle, but it just doesn't really inspire confidence in the same way that the iPhone does. With the Pixel, I'm gonna be honest, I've had some serious problems with the battery. Like it wasn't horrible, but it was significantly worse than the other two with the same types of usage. And I'll usually be at like 30 to 40% by noon. Granted, I do get up pretty early relatively speaking, but still pretty disappointed in this. And every time I mention this in a video, I get a lot of you guys telling me how you're getting amazing performance out of the Pixel, and if that's true, good for you, but that just hasn't been the case with me. Okay, so biometrics. The iPhone is rocking Face ID, which is great when you're not wearing a mask, but you know how these past few years have been, so it's getting really annoying to have to type in a passcode every time I'm in public. They should be releasing an update soon though to make it work with just the eyes, which is awesome, but I haven't gotten to mess around with it yet, so I don't even know how well that's gonna work. The Pixel and the S22 both have under display fingerprint readers, but the Pixel's is optical while the S22's is ultrasonic. The one in the S22 is a lot better. It just works much faster, a lot more accurate, and just much more seamless to use. The Pixel's is fine and it works, but in terms of speed, I always feel like I'm having to wait on it, and it kind of makes me take half a beat to adjust, which just gets a little bit annoying. General performance wise, you're just not really gonna notice that much of a difference between these three, and if you're really curious, running Geekbench on all three of these, the iPhone was the fastest with that 815 Bionic, followed by the S22 with the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1, and the Pixel in last with Tensor. I think the only time this may come into play and you'll notice a difference is in a couple of years when these phones get a little bit older, but as of right now, any one of these can handle pretty much anything that you throw at them without skipping a beat. The software experience is where I think these three really differentiate themselves from each other though, and out of these three, and really out of any of the phones I've tried, the Pixel is probably my favorite. So it's running Android 12 with the Material U design language, and I am a huge fan. First of all, just like aesthetically, something about it just feels very satisfying to me. And when you're looking at UI elements pretty much the entire time you're using the phone, I think it absolutely does make a difference in the experience of using this phone. I especially really like how it can pick out the colors from your wallpaper and apply it to the rest of the UI, and in a lot of stock apps as well. You can actually do this in One UI with the S22 as well, but it's just done a lot better on the Pixels for a couple of reasons. First, because I think that the solid colors of Material U just lends itself to utilize the color options a lot better, and you also get these alternate icons for a lot of stock Google apps that follow a color scheme, which really makes the look more cohesive. Also, these widgets on the Pixel are sick. So the S22 is also running Android 12 as well, but it's running One UI on top of it, and for the most part, I really like it as well. Aesthetically, I think you could make the argument that it's a little bit more modern, but it just doesn't speak to me in the same way that Material U does. I think where One UI really stands out though is just the plethora of features that Samsung shoves in here. And the great thing is that if you ever get bored of this phone, you can just start digging around and you'll probably be able to play around with a new feature that you didn't know about before. And it almost feels like a little scavenger hunt, and if you're a nerd like me about these things, it's a nice way to keep things fresh. Also, shout out to double tapping the power button to launch the camera app. Pretty much every Android phone does this, and I think it's just such a missing feature on the iPhones. And that's just kind of the story with the iPhone and iOS with me right now. Like, don't get me wrong, iOS is fine, and if it's the only thing that you've used before and you're used to it, iOS is totally usable. But if you spent a lot of time on both sides like I do, there's just a lot of key features that I feel like are missing on the iPhone that I use on a daily basis with Android devices. Some of the main ones being picture-in-picture mode for Google Maps. Like, that's something I literally use every single day and it's great. And the other is back gestures, or like a back button. I hate having to reach up into the corners to hit the back button, especially on a phone this big. And I know what you're gonna say, iPhone have gestures too, but it's just not the same. iOS does have a few distinct advantages though, one of them being app compatibility. A lot of apps just aren't really optimized for Android like they are for iOS, which is just a function of how many different models of Android devices exist on the market right now. And this is especially bad, I think, with social media apps. Like, for example, there might be a new feature on Instagram stories that all your friends are hopping onto, but the update doesn't come for Android phones until the trend is already over, which is just really unfortunate. It's gotten a lot better over the past couple of years, but it's still not great. Also, iMessage. I'm not going to get into it right now, but the green bubble discrimination is definitely real, and I'll leave it at that. And the other thing that really stands out to me, as cliche as it sounds, is the ecosystem. If you're a Mac user or have an iPad or anything like that, there are some ecosystem features that I really miss when I'm not using an iPhone. The biggest one being AirDrop. Like, as a content creator, AirDrop is such a convenient way to share files across your own devices and with other people. I know Android has Nearby Share, but the issue with that, at least for me, is that if you're in the US and around my age, chances are that about 90% of the people you know all have iPhones, which makes it a much more useful feature than Nearby Share. Okay, so last thing before we get into the camera stuff is what I'm gonna call all the miscellaneous things that are kind of unique to each of these devices that don't really fit into the other categories. So first and most obvious would probably have to be with the S Pen in the S22. So if you guys like using the stylus with the phone, the S22 has one and it's great. It's the best one Samsung has ever put into a phone, and it does all the things that you love about the S Pen, and now with a shorter delay than ever. I think in the last note it was like a 9 millisecond lag time, and they brought it down to 2 this year using AI prediction algorithms, which is insane. It really does feel like you're writing on a real surface. I don't personally use it all that much, but I know there are some diehard Note fans out there that can't live without their S Pen, and if that's you, this has definitely got you covered. One minor complaint about it though is that it's got this matte finish on it now, so it doesn't slide in and out quite as easy. Like, there's a little bit more friction, but it's not a huge deal. Next, with the Pixel, I would have to say that the speech to text on this thing really is on another level and stands out compared to the other two. Like, the other two have speech to text as well, but it's just so much better on the Pixel. Like, you don't get the feeling as if you need to speak super slowly or speak extra clearly so that the phone will be able to understand you. And the speed and accuracy is just seriously impressive. Like, it got to the point where I found myself actually using it instead of typing, not just in replying to messages or whatever, but like writing my scripts for these YouTube videos. I've been using speech to text on the Pixel instead of typing it out, which just saves me a ton of time and energy, and I love it. For the iPhone, one thing that I really enjoyed on it is actually MagSafe. And I know this is gonna sound kind of silly, but there's a few accessories that I've gotten over the past couple of months of using this phone that have just made my life a lot easier. Like, I got this MagSafe wallet from a company called Moth, which is also a kickstand, and I just love that you're able to keep it on here when you want it and then take it off when you just want the naked phone. But Yeah, since getting this, I've been able to free up one of my pockets, which I just love like from an everyday carry perspective because I don't like carrying that much stuff in my pockets. I also got this MagSafe car mount that has just changed my life and has made driving a lot easier. Okay, now finally let's get to what you've probably all been waiting for, or realistically skipped to this part of the video for, the camera comparison. So these all have multiple camera system on the back, and I'll throw up all the specs on the cameras on the screen because I mean it's just a lot of numbers to go over. But overall, image quality wise, they're all really good, and I think it's impossible to make a bad decision here on that front. But if I had to choose for still photography, my number one pick would have to be the Pixel, followed by the iPhone with the S22 in last by a pretty thin margin. In sharpness and detail, all three of these seem to be pretty closely matched, but something about Samsung's image processing still seems a bit off to me. Like, you can tell that there's a lot of over sharpening going on and the image just ends up looking really crunchy. The HDR processing is also the most aggressive out of the three, and it's especially really eager to bring up the shadows a lot, and it ends up looking kind of fake. The one advantage I would say that the S22 has over the others though is with long range. With the 10 times optical zoom lens, if you want to get shots of stuff that's really far away, the S22 is definitely going to serve you the best. In terms of most other situations though, the Pixel and the iPhone are, in my opinion, a little bit better. And choosing the winner between these two was pretty tough in my opinion, but overall I just felt that the Pixel generally produced the more pleasing image. But again, it's really close and all three of these are going to be great for photography. One note about the Pixel though is that it's lacking any sort of macro mode. Like, both the iPhone and S22 will automatically switch over to the ultra wide if you get close enough to a subject, and it makes for some pretty cool effects. It does, however, have the ultra wide selfie camera, which I really like. The other two also allow you to kind of switch between focal lengths, but it's definitely not quite as wide as the Pixels. So if you take a lot of group selfies, the Pixel has got you covered. For video, I've got to give it to the iPhone, followed by the Pixel, then the S22. And this has been true for a long time at this point, but Apple has kind of had this category of best smartphone video for a while now, and the introduction of the S22 Ultra has not changed that. Alright, and with that, we've covered pretty much everything, but I want to end this video by kind of going over who I think each of these devices is for. Because I think depending on how you use your phone and which features you care about the most, one might be better for you than the others. Okay, so first up, Pixel. Reasons you would get this over the others probably would be if you're looking for that stock Android experience. Like, there really is something to be said about it and you're not going to get that anywhere else. And two, if you're looking for the best photography experience. And I'm not just talking about image quality, even though that, yeah, I do think that this has the best image quality out of these three. Just the camera app I think is also the most enjoyable to use as well and gives you a lot of control without being overbearing. Next, S22. So I think you're going to want to get this if you want the most premium Android experience and you love features, because Samsung just delivers on those in a way that the Pixel right now doesn't. Also, if you really want that stylus, this is the only phone that has that built in. So yeah, good deal. And lastly, iPhone. And I think this one is the most interesting because I feel like the reasons that you'd get this phone over the others has more to do with all the stuff surrounding the phone rather than the phone itself. Because I think the main advantage of the iPhone, I would say, is just the ecosystem and the way that this interacts with other Apple devices as well as other Apple users. And I think there are some real advantages around that. Okay, so that's it for this one. Hope that was kind of helpful if you're interested in any of these devices. I think it can be pretty tough to decide seeing how smartphones are all so good nowadays, but the good thing about that is it's pretty much impossible to make a bad decision as well. Okay, so let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Remember to smash that like button, and if you enjoy content like this, think about subscribing and hitting the bell so you don't miss anything. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace!